and welcome to ADA series. This is a AI Defense Alliance series that we have been conducting for almost close to 2 months now. We have dedicated ourselves to educate on both AI and the cybersecurity. I come from a cybersecurity background, close to 24 years of experience, worked in company like Cisco, HP, Aruba, uh, from network security to product building and compliance. So now I've recently focusing on AI and AI cybersecurity. In today's session, we have thankful Archana is here. She wants to talk about next gen AI, and she's going to talk about how the SOC has evolved and how ways AI is going to make an impact on SOC. Talking about her, she comes with about 20 years of experience in cybersecurity SOC. With that 20 years, she spent about 14 years with Cisco SOC, and she's very instrumental in working with NASCOM, upskilling lots of uh, uh, college grads through first conference session, and then she's also part of Women's in Cybersecurity Forum, where she empowers upskilling women's into the cybersecurity world. With that, I'll let the podium to Archana, and then she's going to talk about the rise of AI-driven SOC. Archana, stage is yours. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. 1 second. Okay, you can see the screen and hear me, right, Nanda?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. So thank you for all whoever has joined. I would say I appreciate you joining from any different part of the world at the same time. Thanks to people who are joining late. I know it's a Friday night, and usually people kind of go out for late night parties, but I think you guys are really investing your time for whatever reasons, so appreciate and thank you for joining. So my name is Archana. I'm from Cisco. The topic that I'm going to cover today is about the rise of AI driven SOC. Before I begin with the session, let me just, as Nanda had kind of, given an overview from where I come in from. So typically, so I've been kind of, you can call me as a veteran in SOC. Basically, SOC has always been my passion. So I did a lot of roles, starting from system engineers to security consultant, and I ultimately decided I wanted to stay in the SOC because blue teaming is something I like a lot. So in Cisco, I've kind of spent more than 14 years. So starting from an analyst role, if you have heard of being a SOC analyst, I've been SOC investigator. Currently, I'm a cyber incident manager in the SOC, predominantly managing all the incidents across Cisco. In addition to that, my passion is I give back a lot to the community, and that's where I'm here today, kind of giving you guys session. But I've been associated with NASCOM Future Skill Prime. For the people who are coming from India, I think you must be familiar what NASCOM is. NASCOM is one of the major body in terms of building, skill initiating section. So I've been one of the special interest group for them, and I've been built a lot of curriculums for academics related to the cybersecurity. At the same time, I've done a lot of career roadmaps so that people who want to switch the career to the cybersecurity, it's all there in the Future Skills Prime. So I really kind of associate myself over there. In addition to this, I do a lot of conferences, public speaking, whether it's internationally and nationally also. So like first is one of the forum where it's kind of an incident response forum where I kind of done a lot of presentations around the SOC. In addition, I have a huge passion for bringing a lot of women in the cybersecurity. So part of the inclusion and diversity community, which I run across Cisco. Okay, with that, let's get started. So the agenda today is majorly, and thanks for the people who are actually who wanted to know more about SOC, and I see there are like Varsha, like you're kind of learning cybersecurity. So I'm going to give today a mix of flavor. I would say I'm not going to go deep dive, but I don't want to just do the speaking from my side. Okay, so if in case you have any questions at any point of a time, feel free to unmute yourself and do so. Let's make the session as interactive as possible. Okay, so agenda that I plan for today is basically begin with what is SOC, then what's the heart of the SOC, and a little bit talk about the evolution of the SOC, and then the transformation journey from SOC 1.0 to SOC 4.0 that we are in today. And we'll talk about some of the use cases that how the SOC is transforming. While there are various, but we are going to stick to with the 45-minute session that we have, like high level, just covering a high level to give you a glimpse of what's that scale looks like as of today, and what enterprises are kind of moving towards for. And towards the end, we'll just talk about somebody who wants to go as a SOC career journey. Okay, with that, before I begin, how many of them are familiar with CyberSOC over here? Please unmute yourself and kind of, you feel free, like, it could be anything. Like, I want this session to be as interactive. So how many of them familiar with the CyberSOC over here? Like, do you know what SOC stands for basically? Okay,
I
Mhm.
think it's Security Operation Center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you're bang on, Innocent. Like, so it stands for Security Operations Center. So the whole purpose of the Security Operations Center is and the SOC has various functions. Okay, and the function that I'm going to talk about is the blue teaming aspect, which means we are the defending teams. And what's our mission? It's all about monitoring and detecting the threats, containing the threats, mitigating the threats, and recovering the system. So anywhere in the enterprise you talk about, anywhere in the world that you go and say that I worked in SOC, the primary responsibility is going to be these four. And do you think, like, as I said, it's a team with the multi skills, right? It's not just like one person sitting and detecting and monitoring and then containing the threats for the organizations and recovering, right? It's a multi team with a multi skill. um, Naturally, it depends on the enterprise to enterprise. Predominantly it's a 24/7, because we need to be relevant, as in, the threats come at any point of a time, right? It could be any time, right? So we always need a SOC kind of an operation, which has to be like a 24/7 coverage. Now, knowing about what is a SOC all about is, as I talked to you, like let's say it's a defending team, right? You're defending against a threat. So, which means it's not just going to be one function within the SOC, right? It's not just going to be a person who is going to sit and detect the threats. And when I talk about the threats, it's all about the cyber threats here, okay? It could be a ransomware threat, it could be a phishing threat, it could be a malware threat, it could be any sort of a threat, it could be even a nation state sponsored kind of a threat, right? So, do you think a single person who is sitting in the SOC could do everything? My answer would be no, right? You ultimately need a team. You need a team of a different function. And that's what, when you talk about the SOC as of today, and it could be like, predominantly these are the major functions that go, and where SOC is kind of working to each other to collaborate. To give an simplest example is, SOC is major about the event response and incident response. They work closely with threat intelligence kind of a function. Threat intelligence could be something thought like, any sort of a threat intelligence that you get is from, it could be like, your have you heard about the indicators of compromise, right? You, at any sort of a threat, whether it's a red, amber, green, if you have heard of all these TLP protocols. So we need a threat intelligence team who is going to bring you a sort of a indicators of compromise. At the same time, you have a forensic department who kinds of, during an incident, they need to do a lot of forensics. You have reverse engineering, you have threat hunting functions. So these are various functions that go across the SOC. Because, as I said, this is a team of multi skills. You cannot just rely on somebody saying that I'm only going to detect and recover and mitigate the threat. You need a combination of the skills. Now, with that, any guess what's the heart of the SOC? Whenever we talk about the SOC and blue teaming, there's one thing that always comes in the mind of everybody. It's there in the slide, but do you want to take a guess? Okay, so the answer to this is like, so heart of the SOC is all about the logs. Okay, when I say logs, is unlike like your other teams, like where red teaming, where you're actually working on TTPs, tactics, techniques, and this stuff. You might have to mask yourself to say that, let's assume I give you a set of logs, right? And if I'm going to ask you to say that from the set of the logs, you guys have to figure out if there is any threat attacker inside your network. How interesting would that be, right? So heart of the SOC is finding out, detecting these threats using the logs. And what do you mean by logs? And this is where I want to give a clear distinction. Logs is something different from an incident. Okay, so logs is nothing but a record of events that is occurring in any system and a network. It's very, very important for you to understand what the log is. And right, just as an example, when you open your laptop, you might have seen the sys log coming, your Windows event logs, right? There's a log for every single event. And these are the basis of the SOC, from where we are going to let and pinpoint saying that there's something malicious happening, or there's something suspicious, or something anomaly happening. So the heart of the SOC is all about the logs. Okay. Moving further, let's look at, before we jump into directly into AI, it's very important to understand the evolution of the SOC. And why this is very important is, If you're somebody who are new to the SOC, let's assume, and the whole world is all talking about the AI, right? Without understanding the history, you will get yourself into that bubble, which you call it as an AI bubble, which, right, people are just assuming that AI is going to take away the entire job. That's not true, right? You need to understand, because that's very significant for us to know what is that AI driven SOC means, and from where is this evolution coming in. Because until or unless you understand the complexity that has been growing in the SOC, and why people are talking about AI and how AI is being utilized in the SOC, you need to go through this evolution. So number one, let's go, and it's going to be SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, and SOC 4 is what I call it in the frame. The framework could be different for different people, but I like to keep it as simple as possible. So essentially during the SOC 1.0, and that was probably in the time of, like, it should be like around 2000, before 2000, like, 6 or 7, like, that was a journey when we were kind of moving towards a SOC. It was all rule based. What do you mean by rule based, or what do you mean by manual logs, right? As simple as, let's assume, in SOC 1.0, the amount of the threats that was there in the digital landscape had been very minimal. Okay, it was still there, but it was not to a larger extent. So if you had to detect as a blue teaming for the SOC, it was very simple. You just have to write one simple rule, and you can do a pattern match, and it was done. Okay, but as and when organizations started kind of adapting to a lot of digital landscape, and the attack surface got kind of increased, we had to kind of find something to scalable to come to address this complexity, and that's where we kind of moved to SOC 2.0. And we'll touch each one of them as we go through, but I'm just giving a high level glimpse, right? So SOC 2.0 was where the I would say birth of SIM just got in. So anybody wants to take what's the full form of SIM? You might have heard this familiar, SIEM or SIM. Anybody wants to take a quick stab of what SIEM is? Varsha, anything from your side? You're learning cybersecurity. Okay, so SIEM basically stands for Security Incident and Event Management System. So it's a system where as I said, like, SOC is made of all logs. So it's a system where you kind of collect all the logs, and you kind of dump it into this. You can call it as a data lake, but it's not the data lake is right, but it's a SIM tool. Okay, and from the SIM tool is where we'll start writing a lot of detection rules. So it's kind of, when you can think about, rather than going from a manual approach where you would have a syslog, you will transition from SOC 1.20 to 2.0, where you had essentially the SIM tool. Can anybody want to take a guess of some of the SIM tools? Like Splunk is one I can say you. Have you heard of Splunk? Have you heard of ArcSight? Have you heard of QRadar? So those are some of the SIM tools. Okay. So
Yeah,
this
I think I've heard of Splunk. I use Splunk, not heard of Splunk. Yeah, so I've used Splunk before to build a
Mm-hmm.
comprehensive dashboard
Yes.
to monitor every endpoint call,
Mm-hmm.
see endpoint performance, number of call, number of failure. So it
Mm-hmm.
helps us monitor the log. So what I just do, I take the log,
Mm-hmm.
check either I'm using Trace ID or whatsoever to figure out what is happening to that endpoint. Yeah, so that's the most
Perfect.
I've used. Yeah.
Perfect. So it's just like you, as you see, right? So we work on the logs exactly as you said, Mr. Like, right? So we get the log, we start writing the rules, what we want to detect, and it is still a very reactive and human-led, right? Over the period, what happened is, I'll talk a little bit deep dive in SOC 3.4 and 4 as we go, but let's stop till SOC 1 and 2, right? So the evolution for SOC 1 and 2, just to give you a very visualization representation, is during the SOC 1.0, the attack surface had been very minimal, because the amount of the digital landscape also was very minimal. The amount of logs that we used to work, probably it was, in gigabytes. It was not even in, like, to today, the way that we talk about. So it had been like, just one person sitting and writing the detection rules. But as SOC 2.0 came in, we needed to scale this, where we started, there were so many logs. We had firewall logs, IPS log, router log, switch log. Where do we kind of dump? One person cannot manage, so we needed a tool, and that's where the birth of the SIM came in, like, Splunk, as you rightly did. So we kind of put all of the logs within the SIM. Now, as we move forward, right, just giving a little example of SOC 1 and 2. So in SOC 1 and 2, how do we how a blue team used to operate, or how we as a SOC used to operate? What essentially we used to do is, like, just a 5-step or 4-step, I would say. First is, Whether you're working in an enterprise or whether it was a small SMB kind of an organization, all we used to do is identify what use case you want to detect. Let's assume you want to detect against ransomware, or let's assume you want to detect any sort of a suspicious PowerShell or suspicious threat actor motives, right? So we used to identify use case. We used to write that SPL, which is called as a search processing language, right? So relevant to your SIM is where you will change your syntax. So we used to write that SPL language, and then we used to set threshold and schedule that as a automated fashion, right? And then we used to save the rule and we're done. So this was a very basic 4 steps, I would say, when we were in the world of SOC 1 and SOC 2. Okay. And to give you a little example of this, I'm taking one example of how the detection rules or how the approach of a SOC was during this 1 and 2. Let's giving a simplest example. Let's assume the use case was something to find us a suspicious PowerShell executions. Okay. And why I'm picking up this example is today, as an attacker, they use a lot of PowerShell. PowerShell is definitely one of the the famous TTP that attackers use, right? It used to be as simple. If you see the I think I've kind of used a little bit of the Splunk because I'm kind of also familiar with the Splunk. So you write a very simple rule set over here where you're saying like, okay, what are the key patterns that I have to match to kind of detect this rule of suspicious PowerShell. Okay. So this was a traditional mindset of a SOC or a SOC analyst when they used to work in the SOC 1 or 2. Can you spot what could be the gaps? Like, it's okay. Like, this is just one example that I'm giving. So we might have 100 rules written like this, right? You might have 100 rules or 100 playbooks that has been written. Can you think of any gaps? What kind of a gaps would this would lead? Any guesses? Like, you want to talk, like, if I'm going to take this approach as of today, and if I say, hey, you need to monitor for 10 different things, you write 10 different rules, which could be as simple as just matching either it's a regex or pattern match. Any guesses, like, what this challenge could lead, right? So this traditional mindset leaded to various challenges. What kind of challenges are they, right? Let's assume you're monitoring for a suspicious PowerShell execution. Now let's assume, as a whether it's your blue teaming analyst or your engineer, you sometimes have your own dedicated engineer. If I'm going to change one particular string in this query, do you think this is going to break my search, right? So if I'm going to change something, like, just as simple as like command line into command underscore line, the query is going to break. And what I mean essentially by the query breaking is your detection power for finding the suspicious PowerShell is going to break. Okay. The second is you might be assuming as a SOC team, you're kind of monitoring for this PowerShell, right? But you never know that some analyst would have changed one single parameter within this query, and you cannot even spot out, okay, until and SOC will lose the visibility, and nobody will realize until an incident occurred, and where you will say, hey, we did had a rule for this to match. What happened to that rule? By the time you will figure it out, you're too late to kind of realize there's something suspicious of in the PowerShell extension. Okay, so this was a challenge that we had in the SOC 1.2 or SOC 2.0. Now, in order to address this, before going to address, like, and as we kind of we're moving towards this journey, is where your logs are coming in not just from, like, probably Windows or Linux server, right? You're getting logs from so many data sources. It could be your endpoint, it could be a fraud, it could be email security, it could be various use cases. So imagine the amount of the logs that you get from all of this system, and you're having SIM tool like Splunk, which is sitting on the top. And if this challenge is, do you think the challenge that I'm talking about, one person sitting and changing the rule, it's going to break the SOC in terms of detection? So that is going to be like, let's assume there's an attack which is happening. This rule is not going to fire because somebody changed the rule, right? Now, in order to address this as a challenge, and in addition, right? So in addition to this challenge, there's a lot of over. So as I talked, that there was multiple cloud of sources coming in. Over the period of the time, analysts thought when the SIM came, it was really good. People said, oh, we can write the rules, we could detect the rules, right? But as and when it was overwhelming, how many rules you're going to write, how many events you're going to handle per day, it became an alert overload for a SOC analyst, because the amount of the threats that you are going to monitor, 100 plus use cases you're going to write, it was really overwhelming for the SOC analyst. Okay. At the same time, there had been a lot of inconsistency. The quality of detection started going down. Yeah. So Nanda, can you mute the person?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
So in order to address this is where the transformation happened to SOC 3.0. And what was that is, as of today, the mindset is rather than writing 100 plus rules for each of the detections, enterprises had been moving towards a concept called detection as a code. And what do you mean by that is something like a developer. If there's any developer in the call, you can be familiar with how you write the codes, right? And probably innocent, you're also a kind of writing engineer, software engineer. You write a code, right?
Yeah, I write Java.
Right. So what we thought is like, this is not scalable if people are going to write 100 use cases. Okay. So they said, okay, let's make this to write like a code, like it could be any language that you write. It's a YAML or JSON, right? So what people started doing is they started writing your entire detection as a code, and not just the Splunk UI interface where you have a nice way of creating the rules. So what are the advantages of that? We will come to that. So what happened is your logic will be buried with the metadata. There's a testing, like your code, right? Your code, when you release your code, what do? You write your code, then you test your code, you ensure your code is version controlled so that nobody tampers to it. Same mindset was adapted to the SOC 3.0, an engineering kind of a mindset. And just to give you a glimpse, so all the codes that was written as a use case got converted as, like, something like a code written language. And why is it so? And I think as a if there are developers in the call, they can understand this better. If you're going to upload it, it's easy to kind of, one centralized way of kind of changing things. So if you're, let's assume the same example, if I'm going to change any parameter in my search query, it is going to go through the testing phase. It's going to go to the deploy. Before it's going to deploy, it is going to test. If my testing is failed, I know there's something broken in my code, right? And in that way, we don't create ourselves a blind spot to detect any sort of a suspicious activity. So this mindset of bringing, rather than writing 10 different use cases, the SOC, enterprises started adapting, calling as a detection as a code. They also called as a, play as a code or detection as a code. So this was one advancement that was done in SOC 3.0. Okay. So what are the advantages, as I said, right? So let's compare this. What is so much about writing this as a code? Yeah, I'm still detecting that, but what's the differences? Now, in my earlier slide that I was talking about, it's one use case for everything, right? Which is a traditional approach. You're going to go to your Splunk, or whether you have your ArcSight or it's RSA Envision or Curator, you're going to write one rules for one detection. So if somebody changes, let's assume if you have a team of 10 SOC analysts, or if you have a global team who are around 20 to 50 analysts, one analyst changes, you really cannot go and figure it out. One analyst is going to change the parameter, or something broke. Let's assume the field got changed, right? There's nobody who can tell. There's a SOC blind spot that we were creating in SOC 1 and 2. But in 3.0, more of like what's easy that for this code is just like your developer, it was easy, like, to kind of write this code, write detections as code, whether it's any language, whether it's your, YAML language, or, upload it to GitHub, and then you have a testing phase that goes, you have a peer review. So somebody wants to change anything, there's a peer review conversation, you're controlling version control, you're doing it, and finally you deploy this to SIM. So that's where the difference started really, kind of, SOC 3.0. And this is just one of the aspect of advancement that is happening in the SOC 3.0. But as such, there are various advancements. But for today, I'm just keeping it a very high level, right? There is this whole talk about SOAR. SOAR is basically orchestration and, orchestration platform where you kind of develop a various workflow. So what I covered today is one aspect of SOC 3.0, but there's other aspect of SOC advancement. But any questions so far that you have? Because I want you to see how people are kind of addressing the challenges, because many people think like, hey, I'm a developer, how am I going to help in the cybersecurity? Because cybersecurity in general has always been a notion that people think it's a technical field and I really cannot come and help it. It's not like that. Whether you're a developer, whether you're a fresher, whether you are a, as simple as you're a kind of a person who kind of designs, there is a need for every single function that is there. Any questions so far before we go to the next slide? Okay, I hear that as no. Okay, so knowing that one of the advancements in the SOC 3.0 was, enterprise started thinking around the engineering mindset, right? So detection as a code is one aspect. Yes, of course, the SOAR, the whole birth of SOAR also happened during that SOC 3.0. And what is a SOAR? Basically is all about orchestration, right? Let's assume there is a use case where you have to go and fetch your virus total results, or where you have to fetch your IP domain. Like you have an IP and you want to know from where this, what is the domain context of it, right? So it used to orchestrate, used to develop a lot of workflows in the SOC 3.0. Now, as we moved on, there were various other challenges as SOC started facing. So one of the challenge which never was kind of which never kind of said stop, was always alert overload, right? More and more advancement, more and more threat sophistication, which means there were thousands of alerts per day that the SOC analyst had to deal, which is like, the highest severity, or the, if you really have to detect a real threat, it was all buried under the noise. And which is still, I would say, this not gone. It is still an alert. When you talk about, go to any enterprises, they still will talk about this challenge about alert overload. The second is, imagine the SOC analyst, right? How much time will it take? But let's assume you get a rule and you get an output for a rule, which is like, you're detecting something as a ransomware threat. You get output of saying that something suspicious happening on your network. What does an analyst would do? Analysts have to go through various contexts. Like first is, let's assume the attacker or the analyst will have to go and find, okay, from where is this IP coming in from? What is my threat intelligence is trying to take? What is my endpoint logs trying to talk about, right? So an analyst itself will spend 12 to 20 searches for us to understand just one event of that log. Do you think it's very scalable? It's not scalable, right? If a single analyst is going to spend 15 minutes of its time, it's not scalable. Investigations takes too long time. And there was because of this, as a result, there was a lot of burning out just happening with analysts, right? Repetitive workflows. There are 10 analysts, repeatedly, they're continuously monitoring, detecting, monitoring, detecting, monitoring, detecting. And also this kind of created a lot of huge skill gap, okay, because there were a lot of people who didn't know to kind of how to really detect the real threats, because everything was getting buried under the noise. So how could you kind of bring in that quality of detection is where the whole SOC 4.0 was talked about. And as of today, we talk about how do we accelerate the speed of detections. How do we let's assume today ransomware happens in your enterprise, you should be very quick to tell there is something suspicious happening. How do we scale this? How do we address this context problem? Is where people are now started thinking. I would not say this is kind of readily adapted at this moment, but people have started thinking, okay, with all these AI coming in, talk about how is AI going to help the SOC? Okay. So one thing, there are various use cases that we can cover it, but for today, I'm restricting, giving you a food for thought of how the enterprises have started thinking about. Okay. So one way how AI could help is they think about SOC LLM as your co-pilot. Okay, it's just going to be your another co-analyst. Assume that you clone yourself. Okay, so you're not really talking about you clone yourself. You have one more pair of hand. Okay, so it's just like, that's why it's called co-pilot. So your analyst is going to work with your LLM in assisting the investigations, and these investigations will go to talk. So this is where we thought like this is one of the better use cases that you could rely on the AI driven like SOC, right? Now, how this AI assisted investigation would look like? Okay, a high level glimpse of this would be like same. Let's assume the same detection. You're detecting a ransomware, so you have a use case. You have a detection rule for a ransomware, right? Then you have a SOR. SOR is basically nothing but you're going to collect all the relevant information. Let's assume there's a rule for a ransomware, something got triggered in that, and an event pops up. So what does a SOR? It will go and fetch like from where this IP is coming, who is the source of this IP, who's the destination of this IP, and what does my virus total domain says, or what's the threat intelligence. And so enrich your data set is what the SOR does. So once I collect this in my SOR, or you can even say an application layer, is where the LLM is going to help us. Like, so there is going to be a lot of back and forth conversation with the LLM to summarize this entire event that a SOC analyst have to do. Like, you remember the 15 to 20 searches that have to do, and a SOC has to understand what's going on. We could use the AI help in terms of summarizing the events, correlating the events, building some timelines and recommendations. So these are the 4 use cases that I'm going to cover at a very high level today. But of course, there are many. but just to give you a glimpse of how people are thinking of adapting the AI in the SOC. Okay, so just let's take an example so that becomes more clear for you. Now, before I jump into example, any questions so far? I know maybe there's a huge of jargon usage, but the whole idea was to give you a glimpse of how people have started thinking. So no matter from which field whether you're a developer, you could start thinking how your skill sets could be utilized if you ever think about switching to cybersecurity as a career, right? So as I said, we need every skill set. We need a developer skill set. We need somebody who's very really at a hands-on as a red teaming or really a blue teaming. It could be a vulnerability. So all of these skills are joined together to see how we could just kind of do this AI assisted investigation. Okay, coming back to the use case to make that simpler, the diagram over here, right? So let's assume you're going to detect a suspicious PowerShell execution. So you will write a detection rule for that, right? So you will say, okay, if this command line has a PowerShell.exe, is where I know that some sort of a PowerShell execution happens. As simple as example, but this is the complex one is different. But for the sake of ensuring that we can cover this as basic as possible, so you will write a detection rule saying that anything with PowerShell.exe, fire me a rule. Okay, so this is going to be a detection rule. What happens next is where I talked about the SOR, right? Or the application layer in your LLM world. Before going to the LLM is nothing but it is going to just give you summarize it. But before going to LLM, you have your application layer in between. So what they're doing is this application layer is going to work in tandem with your SOR. What it is going to do is, like your earlier, once you have set your detection rule, you are going to fetch all relevant logs of this user. Okay, so let's go back to the same user. So there's a user called JDO, and we saw, let's assume this is fired. Okay, so user JDO coming from this host called Win12, and he executed something called PowerShell.exe. As a SOC analyst, this got fired in my screen. What's the next step that happens is I'm going to give this to my application layer or the SOR. What as a SOC it is going to do is I'm going to collect all the relevant logs for this user called JDO. Okay, so I'm going to understand what this JDO is doing with this PowerShell.exe. Is he a threat actor or is it he a legitimate user? So for that, where am I going to rely? I'm going to rely on various logs. As I said, SOC works only on logs, right? So I'm going to collect various logs. I'm going to collect my network logs to understand what is he, understanding his behavior. I'm trying to get authentication log to understand, is he really a valid user? I'm going to go and see what is he's actually creating at his endpoint. I'm going to create some file creation logs. So what as a SOC, I'm going to get in more context to understand what this guy is doing with invoking the PowerShell.exe. And this is where this context will get driven at your application layer, or the SOR is going to help me to fetch all of this. Now imagine if this was a manual process, I will be each time I go and fetch the logs, it takes a minute, okay, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. It's too much burden, right? But with the SOR, thankfully to the SOC architecture, I'm going to condense this entire information. So once I get this entire context of what this user JDO is doing, what do I do next is, there is something as a, there is always a past incident history, right? And it's very important to consider because it's not always a fresh data. What I'm going to do is my orchestrate before going and going to the LLM and talking, it will also say, did this user JDO had any incidents in the past? It is good. And where is it going to fetch this? You will always in your enterprise, you will have some, you'll have some data repository which has been like collecting so much of incidents, right, for past 3 years or 5 years. So you're going to go back and check in your logs or your historical logs saying that did any incidents happen for this user earlier, and what did the analyst do, what actions were taken with this user, what other firemen, what containment steps. So you're going to learn about this user, about this event that got fired. And this also is given as one of the context. So the earlier context is all about fetching the logs, plus is there any historical or previous suspicious behavior that this user JDO had. These two are going to get passed to the LLM. Okay, and when I said LLM, it's not like it's all about private LLM. Nobody's going to go to public LLM, right? You have your all RAG system being built. You have your embedding systems built in your RAG, right? So all of these information is condensed in your application layer or RAG, what you call it as, and gives you this fine output as you see in the screen. Okay, so imagine this, the analyst who had to do this job running every he or she will essentially take 15 to 20 minutes. it's a fraction of minutes that AI is going to give you assisted output in a natural language, because LLM is all about natural language. It's very user friendly, right? It's just as if you're cloning yourself and trying to understand what that alert means. So as you see here, it says user JDO executed a PowerShell, the parent process, and this is all very technical information, but it gives you a nice understanding, step-by-step understanding. And looking at this, a SOC analyst will help, it helps a SOC analyst to understand what's going on with this user, right? Rather than taking 15 minutes, it's going to take a fraction of minutes for people to do. And so this is one of the, and it says like, it's giving you a nice NLP, like natural language, saying that user has logged from Germany. This is a new script is running. 2 minutes later, I have. So it's very nice and user friendly, as if you're talking to your own colleague within your SOC analyst. So this is one of the use case that SOC has been evolving, which is called AI assisted investigation. And some of the additional use cases where LLM could help or AI could help is, one of the important and critical function when we talk about the SOC is maintaining the evidence, right? You need to do understand timeline, like what happened from the beginning, what happened till the end. You need to do a timeline building. So if I'm going to fetch, like as I said earlier, the 2 logs and fetch it to my LLM, you think about building a further use cases of building a timeline building. So earlier traditionally SOC, or as of, even when I say traditionally, it's not like everybody has adapted to this. There's still a lot of challenges. People do this manually, going and figuring out what's my first step happened in this whole incident, what's my second step happened in a lot of manual work. So you could think about utilizing this as one of your AI use case. Further, if you want to think, I want to still utilize some of the automation features, the whole you could do as much as context mapping to do it, right? So MITRE is one of the famous when we talk about the SOCs, because it has a whole uh, kill chain that they talk about how the threat actor is kind of doing. So you could map any of your logs saying that for you to further driven down, right? What it is like, you could map to whether it's happening at my the entire, whether it's like kind of initial reconnaissance happening, or it's like happening at a layer where the attacker is inside. So you could do a lot of MITRE mappings as well. Okay, so these are some of the use cases that you could think about in your SOC. No matter whether your enterprise is adapted or not adapted, it's time for you to bring these use cases to your SOC as well. Okay, let's talk some of the other use cases is also when we talk about the SOC, right? There's an entire so let's assume the same suspicious PowerShell, or let's assume as simple as ransomware. Let's assume you're given a task of detecting a ransomware, right? Now, in order to, once you detect this, you have a detection rule, and there's some certain steps that you have to give as a guideline to a SOC analyst, right? Now, let's assume I'm a new analyst coming and joining as a SOC team. I don't know okay, once I get something on my screen, what do I do? I need to give the guidelines. Somebody has to give me guidelines. Hey, please check this. First step is check parent logs, check your you might have to check your virus total, or you have to inspect this file creation. So somebody has to give me the guidelines. Rather than you doing it, you could entirely give the step to your AI assistant output, where you are giving this as a template to your application layer, saying that whenever you see this alert, you also please look at, this is the template that you have to work. So rather than you doing it, your automation script in the AI or LLM is kind of helping you to collect this information backend. And how would that output would look like? It will start giving you recommendation steps. So once you give the template, feed this entire event logs, it is going to give you the recommendation steps, which is, as a SOC analyst, once I get something fired, okay, it tells me what I have to do. As step one is I need to retrieve this file. Second is I need to investigate this IP. I need to then check this JDOS logs. Then I need to kind of review some of that. So it gives you nice steps as a SOC analyst, so that I don't have to really work through the various 15 to 20 minutes of time. So this is where one of the other use cases where AI is really getting popular in terms of summarizing the entire step 1 to your step 4 that you saw in the SOC 1, right? So these are some of the use cases that we are thinking at an enterprise. But again, there are various use cases, but for the reason of for today's session, I wanted to keep it limited, not too much talking about technical. But this is something that is a food for you to think about. Where is AI getting utilized in the SOC? And it's again, when we talk about AI in SOC, there are two things. Okay, one is AI for cybersecurity and cybersecurity for AI. But right now we are covering only for AI for cybersecurity to see how maximum could we utilize some of the LLMs or some of the use cases of AI to automate a lot in terms of reducing the overload, at the same time, helping the SOC analyst to decide fast. It's a response time. With this, I also wanted to a little bit touch about career road, but before we jump into career, any questions so far? I know that there was a kind of a lot of technical, but this is just to give, like, what are people talking about AI in SOC, AI in SOC? This is essentially utilizing the power of AI in terms of the 4 use cases that I talked about. Uh, as you see over here, right? The 4 use cases is all about summarizing, correlating this entire information with using the AI, building some timeline recommendations for analysts to do. So you're going to clone yourself. You're going to have your clone assistant who is going to actually do the work, and you're not going to do the work. Once you get the output of the screen, it becomes very easy for the SOC analyst to decide it. So these are some of them. Any questions so far? Okay. So with this, I wanted to really, for the folks who are new in this call, to just give you a glimpse, because one of the things when I go to various forums is one of the people, people freshers or anybody, they have a mindset saying that SOC is very technical and I'm not technical. How do I kind of build it? So I want to give you the glimpse. Please don't think, even if as of today, whether you're working in cybersecurity or not working in cybersecurity, there's always an opportunities for you. And as I said, cybersecurity is one of the very beautiful career that you could think about. Whether you're a system engineer, whether you're a software engineer, whether you're a network engineer, or as simple as you're coming from a finance or a compliance, right? You can all fit in this SOC team in various roles over here. As simple as giving example, whether you want to pursue your career as your technical aspect, you could think about becoming a SOC analyst, your malware researchers, your penetration testers. As simple as example, whether let's assume you're a very good animator, right? People will think, I'm an animator, what do I do in a cybersecurity role? There is a role for you guys as well. There's a security awareness. The whole, because when you talk about security awareness, it's all about giving a lot of awareness across your enterprise. There is role for every single thing. You cannot even imagine. People come from a various non-technical backgrounds as well, and they say, like, can I fit in the cybersecurity? I want to switch to cybersecurity. So it's a very beautiful, SOC is a very beautiful career. No matter you come from any background, you have a role within the SOC. And as you want to pursue, sometimes people think, okay, what's my, I'm being like a malware researchers, or I'm being a penetration tester. How do I grow further within it? So as you grow up further, you could think about becoming an architect, you could think about becoming a consultant, you could become an auditor, or you could still stay within your technical lines and become a more investigator role. And what further role that you can think about? You could think about evolving yourself as a managers. You could evolve yourself as a directors, enterprise information, CISOs. At the top of everything is the CISOs. So when we talk about blue teaming and stuff like SOC, not just SOC, but overall in the cybersecurity, the highest and the greatest is CISO, right? Your Chief Information Security Officer. So this is how you could evolve yourself, no matter from wherever you are as of today. Think about this. This is a very beautiful career that you can think about getting inside the cybersecurity role, and especially in the SOC. Yeah, I think that's it I had for today. But any questions?
Actually, there was a question about Claude attack. I think it happened on November 2025. So they used, when Chinese sponsored, that's what the article says. State attack has used Claude to do a simultaneous attack. So I don't think we have investigated. Probably if you could ping us on the meetup.ada group, we will try to investigate and respond to you.
Okay, can you suggest how we prepare based on recent cloud agent attack? Okay. Yeah, so again, I think whoever is Van Chang, if I pronounce your name correct. Yeah, but this session, we are going to have further sessions in terms of, not really onto this attack, but further deep diving it. But today's session was more restricted for people to come think about the career journey and how AI, the word AI is being getting operated in the SOC world. But yes, of course,
it's a good food for thought.
Food for thought.
Yeah, we can investigate, and then probably in the next session, if it is interesting, we'll definitely take it up in the next session.
I think we are planning for further more deep dive sessions, which is more developer. How could you actually build this within the SOC, but not specifically on the attack, but just like how could think about it. But great question, Vanchai.
So any other questions on cybersecurity? And Archana is like working in Cisco, and Cisco being a primary driver of security for almost 3-4 decades. And in fact, SOC, they have bought it. So you can ask her, she's almost had 2 decades of experience in cybersecurity. Career growth, how things are going.
Yeah. And I think one of the thing, because this question which came from Banchang also makes me to also allude to the fact, have you heard about the eco leak, the co-pilot attack that happened in the Microsoft, right? As we're talking about agentic AIs, one of the, that's one of the biggest threat that we are talking about, right? It's as simple as zero touch. You don't even know when the attack is happening, right? So you might have to start thinking about all of these. Is basically begin with your use case, and these are some of the food for thought I'm giving. And as we this is the first session, we are going to deep dive further sessions within this ADA platform to give you more detailed deep dive.
Yeah, so sorry, I dropped for a moment. I had a call.
Oh, no worries. Yes.
Yeah, so for let's say middle companies, not like that much large companies who have funds to have their own LLM, specific server to add to take in these information, what will be your advice for such company? Because if they want to automate these kind of processes with AI, they're going to connect it to like an external an open LLM, right? But the risk is that customers' data is going to be at risk, right? What will be your advice for this?
Nanda, you
So
want to talk
when
like? Mhm.
yeah, so Innocent, I think your question is around if a medium-sized company wants to
Exactly.
adapt a based SOC, and
Yes.
obviously they cannot send all these logs to the
An external,
public,
yeah,
public,
yeah.
100% not. So that is when the private LLM comes into play. So here, there are two approaches that we can have. One is Splunk and the other SIM product. They are trying to build their own, integrate AI into their own system, okay, where we can leverage that and then use those features within the Splunk that comes in.
Okay.
Okay, and the second option is you go for a low cost open source LLM and get it as a private and host it on your own server. When I say hosted, I mean it could be a Azure or Google Cloud, but it is a private cloud. You host it, and then you need to have a very good agentic AI in between, who's able to stitch the whatever the incident that comes in. You have to use the API to call to that intermediate agent and work with LM to give that orchestration what Archana is going to talk about. Like
Yeah,
all the
I think
use
it's
cases that
majorly you have to use the RAG systems, like to ensure that as you rightly said, right, you can't send it to the public LLMs. You have to have your private LLMs. Just so there's your RAG embeddings are very important, like to ensure that you filter a lot of things before it kind of again it's a private. You're not sending your data to public, right? It's all about private LLMs.
So entire system heavy load is on the application layer in between, which comes in where the agentic AI is going to agentic AI is going to do whatever Archana talks about. You convert those data into a Vertex and Vertex DB, and then you do fetch the
Yeah.
similarity, and then as also she was talking about the users and entities past behavior. Fetch those data, connect them, give it to the LLM, and then get the final verdict.
And also when you talk about, no company can exist on its own, right? Example
Yes.
like this Splunk, right? Let's say we are currently integrating Splunk into our production system, right? And then how do we like ensure safety from Splunk access? Because we do not know what is going on in like Splunk company, but we send our data, right? Almost all our data is flowing through them, right? How do we ensure this security from like monitor security from their end?
See, one is when moment you get your data out of your network and then it goes to the cloud. I mean, your Splunk, there are both this on-prem solution is also there, cloud solution is also there. I believe you're talking about a cloud solution wherein your logs, everything goes into a Splunk cloud, and then incident happens, everything, and then
Yeah.
you get the and it's all trust basis, and then the company like big company like Cisco, Splunk, and then they don't violate
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
guidelines that they commit.
yeah. I
Once
think
your
it's
data
all
is
again the shared
isolated, it is isolated.
responsibility,
Then
right? They talk about the
mm,
shared responsibility also, right? It's
mm,
many
Mm.
any cloud. It's not just the Splunk, right? Any cloud, AWS or anything that you do, it's
mm.
they write the concept of the shared
And
responsibility.
any service provider has to do SOC 2 compliant, and then that's when the auditor comes in. Every year they audit the logs, they audit the
Mm.
processes, and then they ensure that tenants, each customer's instance are kept it in isolation. They don't get mixed. Each customer's data are isolated. That's when the third party SOC 2 auditor comes in place, and then they do compliance check, and then they ensure that none of these data, whatever the processes that they commit, are
Mm.
ensured followed. If they find any leakages, that's a big violation, and then they lose the SOC 2 certificates. And it's cost a lot. It costs the reputation of our organization. I'm sure that none of the big companies would do that.
So talking about certificate, if for people like us who are just developers, let's say we want to migrate to software engineering and cybersecurity like SOC, right? What 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 are the required basic certificate professionals like us can have in order to be able to gain a job in a professional space like a cybersecurity specialist?
That's what you want to take
Okay,
that.
I think
There are a
you're talking
lot.
about the career, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
there's definitely a lot certification. Like at least I would recommend you to take the recognized one rather than taking a very
Yeah.
generic course, right? Because
Mm-mm.
recognized is always going to something like Cisco also has, but I'm not kind of showcasing here
So
as a brand, but
starting
yeah,
with
yeah, but mhm.
CH Council,
CEH, I think it's a
CH,
certified
okay, so very generic that you have to start with, and then you can do start specialization on what vertical. As Archana was talking about the bigger chart, right?
Mm.
Archana, if you want to project that again,
Mhm.
there are vendors, non-vendor specific certificates like CH certifications are there. You have to start. I mean, there is a lots of vertical within that you can choose. And then once you conquer that, then if you are in the compliant, there are different streams of certificates are there. And as you could see,
Mm-mm.
there are multiple streams are there. You want to be in the SOC, or you want to be in the forensic, you want to be
Mm.
a vulnerability and pen tester. There are multiple verticals are there. Each vertical has their own set of certificates. It's for to start with. SCH is the good place to start
CH,
with, and then
CH, it is CH.
CH. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, depends, Innocent. If you are a kind of a technical person,
Mm.
accordingly you could choose. And again, if you have a developer background, it's always an add-on advantage, I would say,
Okay.
because you know the way of writing the codes, and you could help us to kind of. So, I always say if it's a developer plus SOC, it's a great combination to do it. But
Okay.
uh, because you
Okay.
again, right, because you could automate a lot of things, but again, as I said, as you certification is going to give you a base understanding, but I think
Mm.
it's all about how you kind of bring in more use cases and solve the challenges that I was talking about, right? The overload, burnout of the analyst which is happening. How could you reduce their time to respond, time to kind of stuff detect? So those are the challenges that all of these companies are started utilizing these automation workflows, right, which could help at least to some extent in the SOC. But again, as you said, you see over here, right, the whole point is, as people are talking too much about the AI, it's not AI is not taking up the jobs, right? It's just we are utilizing the power of some features of AI and integrating within the workflow, either to
Mm.
reduce your time to detect, or either to reduce your time to respond, or either reducing your analyst workflow some way or other to integrate the functions. Yeah.
I see. I like the idea when you say the new pattern they are taking. So let's say you want to make changes, you have to go through writing your queries, committing it, getting it reviewed. It goes through deployment processes before it's being
Yes.
matched. That's a very nice idea.
Yeah. It's yeah.
At least you have a test of what developers suffer, go through.
Yeah. No, that is why, the whole point of today's meeting was to, I know that will be a mix of audience. So, developers said, what do I have to do? So you see, developers also has a role to play in here. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I could see that rule.
yeah, I think, but there's a Wancheng, you have kind of post like, yeah, hallucination is definitely, I haven't yet gone through this first reported AI, but I know hallucination is definitely a bigger thing in the soccer. Nanda, you want like, because Nanda
So
comes from the background
yeah,
of the entire developer aspect. So I would leave this.
so
Oh, no?
hallucination. Yeah. So hallucination is not a bug. It's a DNA of LLM, because the how it generates a next token, and then based on the temperature and weight, it totally randomizes the next word. So
Hmm.
that's a basic DNA of LLM. But as a consumer, we cannot have hallucination, right? Especially on the security. So in order
Yeah.
to reduce the hallucination, you have to provide the context about the particular, when a user is sent a prompt, or when your SIM is going to send a prompt, you need to add a relevant proper context around that prompt. The moment you do that, the hallucination is going to come down drastically.
Hmm.
It's all about what is the agentic AI that you're going to use, and how much reasoning it is going to do, and the context around that, context relevant for that prompt. So it's a multiple combination. How agentic AI is going to work, what type of agentic AI you're going to use, and the context window, and the temperature that you're going to use. So these combination is going to bring down the hallucination drastically down. Yeah, there's no magic bullet.
Yeah. Again, I hope Vacha, we answered your question, but yeah, but that's a reality. We just have to kind of work in a way like
Actually, I
Nanda
just
was
want to
telling.
share
Yeah.
the about the certificates. Quick
Yeah. Yeah.
quick glimpse of when you moment you talk about cybersecurity, right? First is comes that SCH, sorry,
Yeah.
CH, Certified Ethical Hacking, and they have a huge list of certificate stream that they have. They have quite a comprehensive
Mm,
certificates across multiple streams, right from blue team, red team, SOC analyst,
mm,
and then for a blockchain, you have almost every stream. They have proper stuff, and then moment you go products, these are again uh, EC Council is very generic non-product vendor certificate, and then you have Splunk product wise. They have a very good certificate if you want to become a Splunk specialist. And there are like quite a lot: cloud
yeah.
security, risk and management. When you want to become an auditor, this is going to be
Mm,
very useful. And digital for an investigator, once incident happens, when you want to do trace back the incident, this certificate is going to be useful.
yeah. And in case your company sponsors, then I would also recommend SANS. They're actually very huge budgeted, but if there's an opportunity, you could do some of these SANS if you really want to deep dive into technical aspect of things. So, and there are, in addition to this, there's a lot of open forums that talked about this. But yeah, these are some of them. What Nanda was sharing is definitely the recognized one, and SANS is also on the list. If in case your company can sponsor for you, then that's good.
That's a quick time
Yeah,
check. We are up.
yeah, we're
Mm,
done, Nanda.
yeah. So, do we have any questions? People like Varsha, do you have any questions? So we conduct almost every week session. Either it could be on a Friday or Saturday. Our meetup group is called ADA, AI Defense Alliance. We ensure we cover topics right from AI and cybersecurity. In some of the cases, both the combined, and we try to bring in different audience from different fields. Next week also we have a very good speaker from Capital One Bank, who's a senior director of engineering division, who's going to talk about AI and career path in that. So if you guys are willing, then you can track, and then you can join the call. All right.
Thank you. Thank
Any
you, Nanda.
last questions?
Okay, thank you so much. I think maybe because I saw this meeting in Meetup, so I will always see on Meetup, right?
Cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
I
all.
will also connect with you on LinkedIn if I just
Yes.
check you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Alright.
you ping us on the meetup, we'll share the LinkedIn ID.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Varsha. Thanks, Safiya. Thank you, Innocent. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.